Okay, hi guys, good morning. In today's session, we'll talk about how can we create our own YAML file, okay, and how can we create our services in Kubernetes, okay. So we'll talk about that, okay. So now, let me share my screen first. Okay, hope you guys can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, right. So yesterday, what we have did, we have executed our one of the pod, okay, by using Kubernetes, kubectl run pod name, and then -hyphen image, and then the image of the Docker, right? So this is one way. Let me just revise that. So this is our container, cluster. Okay, kubectl get nodes, and then here we can see there is one master and two worker nodes which are running. Okay. Now, if I'll do kubectl get pods to check if any of the pods are running or not, then here we can see that there are no pods which are running in our environment, right? So if suppose I want to run any pod, so what we can do, we can use kubectl run, and then pod name, for example, first pod, and then -hyphen image equal to nginx. Okay, so what will happen? So we can create one pod with the help of this command as well. Okay, so if I'll do kubectl get pods, then we can see there is one pod which is up and running in our cluster. Okay, so this is one way. Apart from this, we can also use YAML files to create our pods in Kubernetes. Okay, so the most easiest way to write these YAML files is to, first we need to have the YAML extension. Okay, for example, if you open your extensions, okay, just search for YAML. Okay, and if you click here, then we can see you need to install this YAML extension. Why? Because as we are aware, right, so basically if there is any syntax issues, then we might not be able to execute our templates. Okay, in this case, if we have this plugins installed in our Visual Studio, then what will happen, it will be very easy for us to develop our YAML files. Okay, so it will take care of the syntaxes, it will take care of the spaces and the intentions. Okay, now once we have installed our extensions, then the only thing what we need to do is just go to your file, okay, on Visual Studio, click on preferences, okay, and then go to extensions and select your extension YAML. Okay, and here we can see some settings.json file. Where is my settings.json file? Extension settings. Okay, so once in YAML, select the settings and click on extensions settings options, and here we can find one edit settings.json. Okay, just try to copy and paste this syntax. Okay, so what will happen? So basically we are telling YAML to take everything from, the Kubernetes schemas needs to be pulled into our YAML. Means if I am trying to write some Kubernetes YAML files, right, then it will automatically pop up for us. Okay, so I will be pasting this in Slack. So try to copy that from Slack. Okay, so DevOps IJP. Okay, copy this in your settings.json. Okay, in your settings.json. So once we are done with this, just close your Visual Studio. Okay, close your Visual Studio and try to reopen again. In my case, it is already configured, so I will not be closing this. Okay, so once this is done, for example, if I'm trying to write something, right, so let us see what will happen. For example, pod.yaml. So the extension for this file should be yaml. Okay, so if you see the schemas, what we have configured yaml. So any file with the extension yaml, we can get the pop-ups. Okay, so try to use yaml extension. Okay, and then if suppose I'm trying to write something, okay, for example, kind, okay, it is automatically popping up. API version. See, here we are able to see some pop-ups, right? So metadata, and then we have our spec. Okay. The moment I'm selecting spec, it is also mentioning some of the attributes automatically. Okay, so with the help of this extension, what will happen? It will be very easy for us to develop our YAML files. Okay, so now we have got our extensions, we have got our schema. So let us see how can we create one basic YAML file. Okay, so in any YAML file, I mean, as part of Kubernetes, there will be 4 fields which are mandatory. Okay, so for example, API version is one of such field. Okay, kind is one of such field, metadata is one of such field, and specification is one of such field. Okay, so what will happen is, this is my cluster. Okay, here if I want to write any YAML file, then I can write. Okay, or else what I can do, I can create my YAML file in my Visual Studio and copy and paste my YAML file on my server, because it will help us with the syntaxes, right? So if I'll see the YAML file, right? So these are 4 important fields in our YAML file. Okay, API version, kind, metadata, and specification. Okay, and if you'll see this table, here we can see 4 different type of kinds. I mean, kind can be either pod, either service, replica set, or replica controller, or deployment. And we also have some of the different kinds as well. Okay, we have limit quotas, we have limit resources. Okay, so we have different kinds available in our Kubernetes. Okay, so we'll see about the different kinds as we progress, but for now, just make sure to understand that these are the 4 important fields which needs to be available in your YAML file. Okay, and each kind will have a different specific version of API. So v1 is nothing but the APIs what Kubernetes has provided. For pod, we can use v1 version. For service, we can use v1. For replica sets, app/v1. For deployments, app/v1. But how will you know this? 2 ways. Either you can go and check the documentation. Okay, because this might get changed as the version of Kubernetes might get changed as well. Okay, so every time make sure to check the official documentation, or else we can get this detailed information from other way as well. So I will explain you that part as well. Okay, so in our case, so I just want to create one YAML file. Okay, and that YAML file is to create one pod, right? So let us try to execute that. Let me remove this. Okay, so this is my first pod.yaml file. So the very first important field is API version, and then as I said, kind is also required. Okay, and then we have metadata. Okay, and then we have spec. Okay, so these are the 4 important fields in API version. What needs to be written? Okay, first is I need to understand what API version I need to use for pod. Okay, so as I said, either we can check this from the documentation, or else what I can do is I can just go to my server. Okay, kubectl explain pods. So what will happen? This will give us the complete detailed information of our pods, how a YAML can be written. Okay, so with the help of this command, we can get, okay, so always the kind should be pod and the API version should be v1. Okay, so now what I will do, API version as mentioned here v1, and this should be pod. Okay, so we have got 2 different fields. So API version is something related to the APIs for the pods, what Kubernetes is using to communicate. Okay, and kind, what you want to create. So in my case, I want to create pods, so I will be using kind as pod. Okay, understood? Guys, from where I am fetching all these details? Basically by using kubectl explain command. Okay, so explain command will help us to get these details. kubectl explain pods, then we can find kind, version, and also different fields as well. Here we can see specification, pod specification, okay, metadata. This is related to some user information kind of thing. Okay, now metadata. Okay, so let us talk about metadata. Then we have in our metadata, what are the different fields? What I can use is name. So what should be the name of my container? Okay, the name of my container will be first pod. Okay, and then what we have, labels. If you want to create any labels, then we can use, or if you want to ignore, then we can ignore. So in this case, we will be using labels. Okay, so labels I want to use, so environment equal to test environment or prod environment. Okay, so in labels we can configure any label. It can be either your name, your city, your address, anything which will help us to identify our pod. Okay, as I have explained yesterday, right? So if you have hundreds of pods, then label will help us to identify which pods are related to which application or which environments. Okay, and then specifications. So in specifications, basically we need to configure details related to our container. Okay, so container, and then the name of the container will be test, for example, and then image, out of which image I want to pull this container. So it will be nginx image. Okay, so always we need to specify 4 fields, that is API version, and then we need to have the kind, metadata, and specifications. Inside metadata we can use name, we can use labels. Inside specifications, specifications is something related to our container details. Okay, metadata is something related to our pod details, what name you want to configure to your pod. Okay, so now we have got our basic YAML file. So what we can do, if you want to know more details, I mean, what are the different things we can add in metadata and specification, then you can check explain command. Okay, you can check explain command, then here you can get. Okay, so let me show you this as well. Explain pods hyphen recursive type grep less, because I just want to get some basic. Okay, this is not working. Why? If I'll do hyphen recursive, right? So what happened? If I'll scroll up, if I'll scroll up from starting, okay, and let me do one thing. Let me try to connect in another terminal. Keygen is Kubernetes, right? So where is my key? Let me try to connect in Git Bash because their interface is not good. Okay, so I have my key over here. So let me try to open this in Git Bash. Instances master. Let me try to connect SSH client, copy this keygen, and then paste. Yes, okay. Sudo su hyphen, then we are into the root user. Okay, kubectl get nodes. We can see the nodes. Okay, so we can use kubectl explain pods hyphen recursive type less. Okay, so what happened now, we can get some more detail. I mean, kubectl explain pods, we can get some of the details what can be used in YAML. If you are using hyphen recursive, then we can get a lot of information related to the pods, what can be added inside our YAML. Okay, so here if you see, so API version string, what we have added, v1. Okay, and the kind is pod, and then metadata. So inside metadata we can configure labels. Okay, and then we can configure all these all options. Okay, so what we have configured, we have configured name as well as labels, only two. So we can use these different options inside our metadata. Okay, if it is required, then we can use all these details. Okay, and then what we have in specifications, if I'll show you the specifications tab. Okay, in specifications we can add all these details inside the specifications. Okay, so from here we are able to understand what we can use, what values we cannot use. Instead of using documentation, better to go with this explain command. Okay, so with the help of explain, we will get the complete detailed information, what are the different attributes or options, what we can use for our YAML files. Okay, so once done, so what I will do now, we have got our YAML file, what I have written. So this is our first YAML file. So let me copy this. Okay, let me use vi first.yaml, hit enter, and then let me paste this. Okay, if I save this, okay, done. If I'll do cat, then here we can see. Okay, then here we can see this is our basic YAML file what we have created. Now, how to run this YAML file? Okay, so we were able to create successfully one YAML file, and how can we get all the details? We have seen that, but how to run this YAML file? So we have one command called kubectl create command. Okay, so kubectl create command -f means file. Okay, and then the file name .yaml or dry run. Basically, this is a just a dry run check at the client side. Okay, so now let me try to execute this. So we have kubectl create -f and then first.yaml. Okay, -dry-run. So what will happen? It will just show us what might happen on the end infrastructure. Okay, so if you want to apply these changes, then we will remove the dry run and then we'll try to execute this. First pod already exists. kubectl get pods. Okay, there is one pod which has been running 15 minutes. Okay, so let me try to do one thing. Let me delete this. Okay, kubectl delete pods -all. So what will happen? It will delete all the pods which are available on our Kubernetes cluster. kubectl delete pods -all. Okay, so I have deleted the existing one. That's the reason we were unable to create a new pod with the help of YAML. Okay, so let me now try to create again. So this is our YAML cat YAML. Okay, and then if I'm trying to execute this by using kubectl create -f and then first.yaml. Okay, what happened? One pod has been created. So how to check the list of pods which are running? kubectl get pods. Okay, here we can see one pod is being getting executed. Okay, so this is how we can create our pods with the help of YAML. So any YAML, whether it is related to replica sets, replication controller, services, or any other YAML files in Kubernetes, will be having only these four fields: API version, kind, metadata, and specifications. Okay, so I have shown you how to get the details, what needs to be added inside these YAML files. Okay, no need to remember this. No need to remember what are the different options which are available. So everyone, if you have any doubts, what needs to be added, then you can check explain -f recursive. Then you will get all the details. Okay, hope this was clear.
Yes.
Is it easy? Anand ready?
Yes.
I just want to hear it from Anand.
Little bit easy, sir.
Little bit easier. ఇంకా ఇదే బెస్ట్ ఆప్షన్, ఇంకా వేరే ఆప్షన్ లేదు నా దగ్గర. ఓకే,
మీరు చెప్పకముందుకే ఆన్సర్ చెప్తున్నాను ఇక్కడ కూర్చొని.
ఏం
మీరు
చేస్తుంటా,
చెప్పకముందుకే ఆన్సర్ చెప్పేస్తుంది.
అడ్వాన్స్ కదా కొంచెం. Okay, so this is how we can write our YAML files. Now let us see what are the different options which are available. Okay, so if suppose I want to check the IP address or I want to get the complete details of my pod, what I can do, -o and then void command can be used. Okay, so here we can see it's been running from 106 seconds, and this is the IP address of our pod, and this is scheduled on worker 01. Okay, so that's one thing. And so this is what I have shown, how to get the complete details. Guys, I have written almost everything in these notes. Okay, so no need to write any separate note, just read this and you will get the details. Okay, and apart from recursive, okay, so what we have did, we have used kubectl explain pods -f recursive to get the complete details what needs to be added in YAML, right? So apart from this, we have one more command which we can use. Okay, so what will happen, so kubectl run nginx -dry -run equal to client. So basically this is a dry run. Okay, and then I am using -o YAML. So basically what it will do, this will display, for example, you want to write any YAML file from HTTP, for example, nginx, sorry. Okay, nginx. So what we can do is we can use -o YAML. So what will happen, if I hit enter, then this syntax will get created. Okay, we can copy this syntax and we can modify here. We, if you see, there are some unwanted things, I don't think so, which are required for us for now. So we can remove this from our YAML file. So instead of writing it from scratch, what we can do, we can use -o YAML extension. What will happen, this will display one YAML file for us, right? So is this easy, Anand? ఆనంద్,
కొంచెం డిఫికల్ట్గా ఉందన్న.
ఇది కూడా డిఫికల్ట్ ఉందా? మొత్తం యామెల్ వాడే ప్రింట్ చేస్తుడు కదా, మనం రాస్తలేం యామెల్ ఇది. సో దిస్ ఈస్ వాట్ వీఆర్ గెటింగ్ ఫ్రమ్ Kubernetes itself. We need to just modify. Okay, but better not to use this. Always keep a practice of writing YAMLs from scratch with the help of -f recursive command. Okay, so this is done, and then we'll move. Okay, and if suppose, okay, if you want to update any of the object, I mean whatever I have created, right? So just now what I have created one pod. Okay, so if you want to update the pod, for example, kubectl edit pod and then the pod name. What is our pod name? First pod. And if I'll hit enter, then here we can make the changes of our pod. For example, okay, instead of nginx, if you want to change the image version, for example, if you want to change the image version to nginx :v1, for example. Okay, so what will happen if I save this? So this is how we can make the changes in our YAML files. Okay, edit cancel, no valid changes were saved. Basically nothing has been reflected because whatever the change I have made, right, so that was invalid. There is no specific version called v1, so no changes has been reflected. But if you want to make the changes, we can use kubectl edit command as well. Okay, and then now we have very important concept. So we have two different commands. If suppose, if you see this kubectl get pods, we can see one pod is running. So let me edit my YAML file, vi first pod.yaml. Okay, here I am changing the name of my pod. Here I am configuring a second pod. Okay, same YAML file, I'm just changing the name of my pod. Okay, and if I will try to execute, earlier what we have did, kubectl create we have used. Okay, now I will be using kubectl apply -f and then the YAML file name. I can hit it. What will happen, one pod will get created again. Okay, kubectl get pods. Here we can see two different pods are being executed. So now what we have did, earlier for first pod I have used kubectl create, and for second pod I have used kubectl apply. Now what's the difference between these two commands? Why are we using multiple commands to create? Okay, so why are we using multiple commands to create? So in Kubernetes, I mean, creating of any pods or creating of any deployments or creating of any replica sets. So these we call as objects in Kubernetes. Okay, so kubectl basically support three type of object managements. Okay, means we have first one called imperative commands. Okay, second one we have we call them as imperative object configurations, and third command we call as declarative object configuration. Means, okay, so we have three different type of commands in kubectl. Okay, whatever we are not creating from YAML, we can consider them as imperative commands like kubectl run nginx -fn image equal to nginx. That command we can consider as imperative command. Okay, and we have kubectl create. Okay, so kubectl create, whatever we have used, is one of the example for imperative object configuration. Okay, and then just now what I have used, kubectl apply. The kubectl apply command will is nothing but declarative object configuration. Guys, 1 second. Guys, 1 second. Yes. Okay, sorry. Okay, so we have three different type of kubectl commands what we can use. Okay, so whichever is not being created by using YAML, we generally call them as imperative commands. Okay, and kubectl create is one of the example for imperative object configuration, and kubectl apply is something what we call as declarative object configuration. Okay, but now what's the difference between them? Okay, so basically imperative object configuration means whatever the resources we are trying to configure, like pods, service, replica sets, or etc., by our own. Okay, so I mean we have created our YAML and then we are been trying to execute them. Okay, so but whereas imperative object configuration, so this will help us to modify our existing objects, like for example, just now what we have used kubectl edit pod first pod. So what we can do, we can make the changes in the existing configuration. For example, let me use this. Okay, instead of nginx, let me use httpd. Okay, see, the moment I have edited this, what happened? Pod first pod has been edited. If you see kubectl get pods, then we can see the pod is been running. Okay, first pod, and here one means one time it has been restarted just now. Okay, and then if you see kubectl get kubectl describe pod first pod, then here we can see the changes. Okay, successfully pulled the http image. Means what happened, whatever we have created with the help of imperative object configurations like kubectl create command, we can edit or modify the changes. Okay, so what I have did, I have used kubectl edit command and edited that YAML. But here if you see first.yaml, let me remove this first.yaml. Okay, so rm first.yml, so let me remove this. Yes. Okay, and if you see this, our existing YAML file, so there is no change in this YAML file. Still the image is nginx only. Okay, means the changes whatever I have did with the help of kubectl edit, okay, the changes will not be stored in YAML, but the changes can be reflected on the cluster side. Okay, like I mean kubectl create command creates a resource from a file. Okay, like JSON or YAML formats are accepted. Okay, if the resources already exist, kubectl create will error. Okay, means again, so we are using the same YAML file, right? So cat first.yaml. So kubectl get pods already. There is one pod with name called second pod is already available, right? So if I'm trying to execute again kubectl create -f and then a pod name, I mean the YAML file name, hit enter. So what will happen? Error from server already exists. Okay, so what is happening whenever we are trying to use kubectl create command again and again? So it will always throw error for us, and we can change the configurations with the help of kubectl edit command. Whereas for declarative command, so what I have did, I have used kubectl apply for second port, right? So let us see what will happen. Kubectl apply -f and then first.yaml. See, ports or second port unchanged means it will not throw error. Basically, it will check if there is any kind of change in the YAML file is available or not. If we have created the pod using kubectl apply command. Okay, if you remember kubectl apply, I mean the second pod I have created by using kubectl apply, not by kubectl create command, right? So whenever we use apply, and it will check if there is any change or not, and then it will throw the status as unchanged. But whereas for create, it will throw the status as already exist. Okay, for example, now there is a change. There is a change, for example, from the environment prod to test. Okay, now if I'm trying to execute the same YAML file, see what happened? Configured means the change has been configured, updated. Okay, this is happening when we are using kubectl apply command. Okay, basically as part of declarative, Kubernetes will take care of all the resources. Okay, means we just need to mention what is our requirement, and based upon the requirement, the Kubernetes will take care of the output. Okay, for example, this was my requirement. Okay, so I need one pod with the name second pod and the label prod. Okay, and then the image should be nginx. Okay, and the moment I have executed apply command, then Kubernetes will create a pod for us. Same things are happening in create as well. It is almost similar, but the thing is, if I'll use apply, then whenever we are trying to make any changes, we are directly making the changes in the YAML file. And then again, if we try to apply, then the changes will get updated. But whereas for this create command, we need to edit the YAML file, and the changes will not be stored in our YAML. Okay, that is the Kubernetes cluster YAML files. Okay, so what is the difference? Basically, we just need to specify our inputs, and the output what we are expecting we can see with the help of declarative object configurations. Okay, so declarative object configuration basically will help us to modify our existing YAML file. Okay, and if the resources already exist, then this command will not throw error, but it will try to check if there are any changes or not. If there are any changes, then it will update. If there are no changes, then it will tell us as unchanged. So that's the difference between imperative commands, imperative object configurations, and declarative object configurations. Mostly what we will be using declarative object configuration only, because we are going to make the changes in the actual YAML file. Okay, that's how we are going to use. Is understood?
Yes.
So now we'll see how can we set the environmental variables. So currently we have set some environmental variables as well. If I show you this, get pods -show -labels. Then here we can see there are two labels. I mean, for first pod the label is environment equal to prod, and for the second pod the label is environment equal to test. Okay, but similar case in YAML, what we are trying to do, we are trying to just add one label section in metadata. Okay, and then we are trying to add our labels, and inside the container, if you want, then we can add these labels. Okay, for example, let me copy this YAML file. Okay, let me make the existing changes. Before this, let me try to delete my pods. kubectl delete pods -, all. The reason why I'm deleting is because I don't want any kind of confusions. Okay. This has been deleted. If you want to check, kubectl get pods. Okay. As of now, we don't have any pods. Then let me make the changes in YAML. Okay. So here what I have did, I have added some environmental variables inside my container. Okay. Earlier what we have did, we have added some labels to my pod. Now I'm trying to add some environmental variables inside my container, what we have seen in Docker as well. Okay. So let me save this. Now let me try to execute kubectl apply. So what is apply now? Whether it is imperative or declarative? Sorry?
Declarative.
Declarative, right? Okay, kubectl-f, and then we have our first.yaml. If I'll hit enter, then we can see one pod has been created. If we'll see kubectl get pods, we can see the running pod. If we'll see -o where, then we can get the complete details of our pod. And if we'll see -show -labels, then we can see what are the different labels what we have configured to our pod. Okay. So here we have configured two labels to our pod, and now I want to check what are the different environmental variables available inside my container. Okay. So how to check the container ID? Here we can see that this pod is running on worker 02. Okay. kubectl get pods. Okay. kubectl describe pod, and then first pod. Sorry, there is some spelling mistake. Here we can see, we'll scroll up, then here we can see, we can find one container ID and then the image what it has been used. So with the help of this container ID, we can check or connect. So generally what we used to do in Docker, if you want to check the list of running containers, sorry, if you want to log into the container, so we will be using this command, right? So docker exec -it and then the container ID, and then env, it will throw the environmental variables. But whereas in Kubernetes, we will not be able to find our containers on the worker nodes. For example, let me show you this as well. kubectl get pods -wide. Where is this pod running? This is running on worker 02, right? So let me try to log into worker 02 now. Okay, if I'll go to my instances, and if I'll go to my worker 02 and try to connect EC2 instance, sudo su -, and then if I'm trying to do Docker, how to check the list of containers running in Docker? Docker container ps. Okay, the moment I try to execute docker container ps, here we are unable to see any container, but here in master we can see that this container, this pod is being scheduled on worker 02, but still we are unable to see our container. So basically earlier, prior versions of Kubernetes, we used to see the list of containers which are running on our worker nodes. Here if I execute docker container ps, then I should have seen the nginx image which is been running. But as of now, we will not be able to see the running containers on the worker machines. The only way to communicate or to check the container details is from kubectl only. Apart from kubectl commands, we cannot check the running containers on the worker nodes. Okay, if we try to log in and check, we will not be able to see that. Okay, now since we will not be able to see that, then I just want to know the id of my container. With the help of describe command, I will get this id. Okay, let me copy this and let me clear the screen. and here we have one command, okay, kubectl exec pod name and then environment. I mean whatever details you want to check, env. Okay, so in this case what will happen, I can see the environmental variables. So what are my environmental variables? My name and city, right? So let us try to check this. kubectl exec first pod env. Okay, sorry, kubectl exec pod and then this one. Okay, so kubectl exec pod and then the pod name. Okay, so kubectl exec pod and then first pod is the name of my pod and env is the environmental variables what I want to see. If I'll hit enter, kubectl exec pod -f command instead. Exec command is duplicated and will be removed in pod -f command. Okay, let me use this. Let me try to clear this. Okay, kubectl exec pod name is first pod, then -env. What happened? This is also not working. So let me check help kubectl exec -help exec pod or type name -c and then the arguments. Okay, kubectl exec first pod -date. Okay, so this is working. So env. Okay, so it is displaying all the environmental variables. So basically the command is kubectl, okay, exec and then the pod name first pod, then -space what you want to see. So I want to check all the environmental variables of my pod. So let me modify this as well. So if I'll hit enter, then here we can see the name what I have configured and the city what I have configured. Okay, so if you want to check the environmental variables or any other details from your pod, or basically inside the pod what will happen, so there will be one container, so these variables are configured to the container only. So if you want to check anything, in this case we can use kubectl exec command. Okay, if suppose assume that we have multiple containers inside one pod, it is not mandatory that we will be running only one container, right? So for example, if we have multiple containers, in this case what we can do, we need to use a command -c parameter. For example, if we have multiple containers, so first we need to check the name of our container. So where can I find my name? I can find in my YAML file as well. Okay, so this will be the name of my container, nginx. Okay, so or else I can get these details from kubectl describe pod and then pod name. From here also I can get these details. If I scroll up, then here I can see the name of the image. Okay, so we have multiple ways from where we can try to get these details. Okay, so how to check if you have multiple containers? Sorry. So how to check if you have multiple containers? Then we can use kubectl exec, then our pod name, irst first pod, and then -c, then container name -env. Sorry, name was nginx, right? So I've given wrong name. -env, right? So with this, we can get the details of our containers. Okay. Let me add this. Basically, this has been deprecated. Okay. Now, if you want to log in inside your container, okay, which is running inside a pod. So what I can do, I can use it bash. Okay, for example, this way. kubectl xec then your pod name -it and then bash. Okay, now we are inside our pod. If you see this, we can see that we are inside our pod. So this is how we can log in inside our pod, and if you want to make any changes, then you can make any changes here as well. Okay, so if you have multiple containers and you want to log into a specific container, then we can use -c parameter and again the container name and then -it and then bash. Okay, so this is how we can check the different commands or any environmental variables, or to log into our pod or log into our specific container inside one pod if you have multiple containers. Okay, so yeah, that, I hope this was clear. You guys understood? Okay, and then for example, if you want to pass any arguments or if you want to run any commands inside your container, then we can use arguments. Okay, sleep 50, what will happen? It will wait for 50 minutes, sorry, 50 seconds, and then it will try to start our container. So basically this command will execute it. Okay, I just want you guys to try to execute this as well, so I will not be showing this. So you have your yaml files and you can try to execute this command and see what will happen. Okay, now if suppose we were talking about the multiple containers, but we haven't created any multiple container, right? So if suppose if we have multiple containers, then how can we configure them? Okay, if suppose we have multiple containers, then how can we configure that? So if I copy this YAML file, so same YAML file, we are just adding inside containers. I'm trying to add one more container. So name, that is second container, and then image is Nginx. Okay, before this, let me try to delete everything which has been created. kubectl delete pods -. Sorry, I'm inside the container, right? So let me exit. kubectl delete pod -. Okay. Now let me modify my YAML file, and in this YAML file, I just want to add one more value. -name equal to, for example, same. Let me use Nginx only. Okay, and then image equal to Nginx. Okay, so here we are trying to run multiple Nginx, but here let me change the container name Nginx1. Okay, and then let me try to use the same image called Nginx, or else let me do one thing. Okay, let me paste the existing YAML only. Okay, so here I'm trying to create two containers, one container with the name first Nginx with some variables, okay, and one argument as well to sleep 3600 seconds, okay, and then I'm trying to add one more container, that is second container, and the name of that sorry, the image what we are using will be Nginx. Okay, now if I'll try to execute this container, right, so we can see what will happen. kubectl apply -f and then first.yaml. Pod has been created. If you see kubectl get pods -o w, sorry, -w, what will happen? We are just watching our existing pod. So what's happening now? Inside our first pod, we have executed two containers. Okay, if you want to see this, here we can see the status as 2/2. Okay, so kubectl describe pod and then the pod name. First pod, we can get the complete details. Okay, here we can see one Nginx image has been created, and then second container is been also getting started. Okay, so we can create multiple containers inside one pod as well, just by adding one more parameter to our existing YAML only, hyphen name, and then this container. Okay, now if I see this, right, so where this has been created, so worker 01. Okay, so if I clear kubectl get pods hyphen -y, then here I can see that both these pods have been executed on worker 01 only. Means, okay, I mean, if there are 2 containers or 5 containers inside one pod, so Kubernetes will execute this pod in only one node. I mean, if we have 2 containers and we have 2 nodes, then that doesn't mean that Kubernetes will execute on worker 01 and worker 02, two containers in 2 different node machines. So basically, Kubernetes is responsible to manage the pods. Okay, so it will schedule this pod on any worker node, and inside if this pod we have 2 containers or 10 containers, then all that 10 containers will be running on the same worker node only. Okay, now by default, I mean, whenever we create multiple containers in the same network, right, then it will be able to communicate between them. It means, okay, by default, the networking will be same. If since they are both in the same same worker nodes, what will happen? They can communicate with any of their pods containers inside the same network. So if you want to check, then we can use this. Okay, so if I'll see this. Okay, now we are inside pod 1. Okay, now check the open pods by using nextchat NLTP. So with the help of this command, we can see if port number 80 is open or not. Okay, if I'll open this NLTP. Sorry, nextchat command is not found. So let me check the operating system of this image. Cat OS release debian red app get netstat. Debian. Let me check. Install netstat in Debian container. Basically, if I want to check, then I need to have netstat installed. Okay, let me use this command here and then paste. Netstat. This command is not working. ls of -i tcp:80. Command is also not working. So if I'll do curl and port and netstat is not available, I need to install this netstat now. Apt-get install nettools. apt update. Okay, first let me try to update my container. Okay, and then let me try to execute this command. Hopefully this time this is working. Okay, now if I try to do netstat, NLTP, here we can see port number 80 is been listening. Okay, now let me execute this again. So port number 80 is opening. So this port number 80 is being opened to this port. Okay, I mean to this container, right? So okay, so for example, now I just want to use one more terminal so that I can check this. Okay, how to do this? Let me get some way. So basically what I meant to say is both the containers, if they are inside the same network, then we will be able to communicate. Okay. So we have two containers now running on port number 80 and 80, right? So if I try to do, let me exit from here. Let me check the container names, first.yaml. Okay, first pod and second container. First container and second container, right? Unlike localhost. Telnet is also not working. Let me do one thing. Okay, we'll ignore this for now because Telnet. I mean, I need to customize one image. There are a lot of packages which are not working. Okay, so we'll ignore this for now, and we can see this after some time. Okay. So apart from this, we have something called init containers in Kubernetes. Okay, so what do you mean by init containers now? For example, in our case, what we have did, we have created multiple containers. Okay, so we have created multiple containers. So we have one concept called init containers in Kubernetes. So what happens if suppose there are multiple containers, what you want to execute? Okay, now out of these two containers, the second container should execute initially. I mean, first it should execute second container, and if the second container is successfully executed, then only it should execute the first container. So in that case, what we can do, we can configure init containers. Okay, so init containers can be anything related to your dependency of the application or something related to your functionality of the application, which will help you to start your containers. Okay, so init containers are used if you want any container to execute before the app container starts. Okay, init containers, I mean, this is also exactly same like our containers. Okay, so but once the init containers are successfully done, then only the second container will start. If the init container is not successfully executed, then the second container will not get started. Okay, so in what kind of use case we are going to use this? For example, if you have multiple containers, and one container should download the code from GitHub, and the other container will start your application. Means without source code, we will not be able to run our application, right? So in this case, we can use init container. So first container will download your source code. If the downloading of the source code is done, then only the init container or the container which where your application is running will get executed. Okay, in another case, if you have two containers, one is web application and one is DB, so web application should only start only after DB. Means if the database container is up and running, then only the web application should start. In this case, we can use init containers. Okay, so if you check this parameter, so we are writing, this is our first container. Okay, and this is our second container, and here I'm specifying one more block with init containers. Okay, so and then I will configure the detail of my container. I mean, if you see this is the same detail what I have used for my first container. Means if this container is successfully up and running, then only this container will be starting. Means if this init container is successfully done, then we can see the second container running. So here what we have did, we have added one sleep command for 30 seconds. So generally what should happen, it should wait for 1 hour. Means 36 100 second means it is around 1 hour, I guess. Okay, so it should wait for 1 hour and then it should start our container. But previously what happened, kubectl get pods, here we can see both the pods are up and running. Okay, but let us see what will happen when we use init container. Okay, so first let me delete them. Delete kubectl, delete pods, -f1. So it will delete both these containers inside this pod, and then I will try to add this init container. So init container will hold for 30 seconds, and then only our second container will get started. Okay, or else this will not get executed. So let me remove this. This is not required here. Okay, this is done. Now if I try to edit my existing YAML file, I'm using only one YAML file because I don't want to confuse you guys. Okay, so if I try to copy this, okay, and if I try to save this, now how to execute kubectl apply -f and then first.yaml. And number 16, there is some error. Better to copy this here. Instead of fixing this, I will be using Visual Studio. Okay, so okay, spacing square mistake. Okay, so let me copy this now, or else let me try to fill this. Okay, so let me try to run. Right, I'm trying to use kubectl apply. Then pod has been created. If you will see kubectl get pods, okay, here you can see that 2 0 by 2 status, and after 30 seconds, let me show you this. Right, iPhone watch. Okay, so you can see 16 seconds, right? So what I have did, I have asked my init container to sleep for 30 seconds. Means after 30 seconds, this will get started. Okay, so here we can see 0 by 2 are ready and init 0. See, after 30 seconds, what happened? One pod has been started and then one is running. There is some error in another pod. See, 1 by 2, 2 by 2, 1 by 2. There is some error. That's the reason only one pod is been ready. Okay, so basically what happened if I are using init container, so we can see that once our container is up and running, then only the second container will get started. So this is how we can manage multiple containers if you have any dependencies. Okay, if you have dependencies between two containers inside one pod, then we can use init containers. Okay, so here we can see init 0 by 1. What does this mean? There is only one init container. That's the reason the status is 0 by 1. So once this is up, then the status will be 1 by 1. Okay, and here see 2 by 2. There was some error running. Again, it is error. So there is some issues in which pod, 2 by 2 pod. I think this one. Sorry, this one. Okay, so we'll not see what is the error because as of now I'm not worried about these errors. I just want to show you guys how the init containers are working inside our pod. Okay, so if you use -o void -w, what will happen? Basically, we are monitoring the command. We are monitoring this. I mean, we are continuously watching. -w means watch. Okay, understood? If you have multiple init containers, then what will happen? The status will be 0 by 2. Out of 2, how many has been created? We can see that. Okay, kubectl get pods. One container is only running, second container is getting filled. The status is also error. If you want to check the details, kubectl describe pod first pod. So what is happening? Started container, pulling container. Okay, so this is one of my container, first container, and this is my second container. In second container, we are seeing some error. Okay, it has been started 4 times till now. That's the reason here we can see into 4 in our logs as well. Into 3 means 3 times, into 4 means 4 times. Okay, so back of restarting failed container in first pod. Okay, Kubernetes not ready. Okay, there is some issue with this image or something, and this is getting failed. Okay, so this is how we can use pods inside our init containers inside our pod. Okay, guys, understood? I know this is somewhat kind of confusing, but I just want you guys to go through this document as well as go through the video. Okay, understood? Where are we, guys? Any questions? Okay, and then we have something called services. For example, okay, let me show you something. kubectl get pods. Here we can see only one pod is running. So let me delete this. Okay, kubectl delete pod, and then the pod name. Yeah, so let me delete this pod. Okay, so I have deleted, so we don't have any pods as of now. If I see get pod, then you can see there are no pods running. Okay, so now let me try to modify my YAML file. Okay, so let me remove this init container because this is not required for us as of now. I don't want multiple containers as well, and even I don't want these values inside the container. So let me keep this very simple. Okay, so this is my YAML file with two labels. One is prod and one is name. Okay, and then the container is Nginx container. So now let me try to start this. Okay, so how can we use this? kubectl apply -f and then first.yaml. Okay, one pod has been created. If you see kubectl get pods, then we can see the running pod. Okay, now I just want to try to access my container, okay, with the help of this is the IP, right? So if I try to copy this IP and hit on browser, we will not be able to access our pod because as we have seen in Docker as well, right? So this is restricted only to your local machine. I mean, at the server level only. So this is the IP of our pod where our container is running. If I'm trying to access, but I will not be able to access this. So in order to access your containers or your pods outside the world, we have a concept called services in Kubernetes. Okay, so basically services are used to expose our pods to outside world. Okay, for example, we have deployed a Apache web server or Nginx, right? And you want to access this from your computer. I mean, from my browser, I want to access. And this is only possible with the help of services in Kubernetes. Apart from services, we will not be able to do this. Okay. So services are also objects like nodes, pods in Kubernetes. Basically, services is also one of the object only. I mean, we have some objects like what we have seen. We have seen nodes, we have seen pods, and the next object is services, what we are going to see. Okay. Now, if you want to see if there are any services which are available in your cluster, I mean in your Kubernetes cluster, then what we can do, we can see kubectl get services, and then here we can see multiple services which are been running. Okay, this service I have created 13 days before, so let me delete this. I don't want this service for now. kubectl delete service notepad service. Okay, so by default what will happen is when you try to execute kubectl get service in your laptop, then you can see only one service, that is cluster in your machine. Apart from this, you will not be able to see any other services. Okay, now in Kubernetes we have three type of services. One is cluster IP, one is notepad, one is load balancer. Load balancer is specific to AWS, I mean to the cloud providers only. So I will be talking about load balancer after some days, I guess. Okay, but we'll talk about cluster IP and node port. Okay, so basically what will happen is when we use any cluster IP, right? So if I am using cluster IP service in Kubernetes, so what will happen? So this will help us to communicate within our cluster. Means if suppose we have one master and then we have one worker 01, okay, and then we have one worker 02. Okay, so this is nothing but our cluster, right? So if we have one container, for example, one container, and then we have one more container in worker 02. So if you want to communicate between these containers, okay, internally between these containers in different node machines or within the same cluster, then cluster IP is something what we will be using. Okay, means for example, let me show you this. No, not this. Let me go to images. This is very confusing. Okay, see, if you see this diagram, okay, so this is also not something what I was looking. Ingress, no. Okay, so I think this is something. This is good. Not like even noticing regress. I don't want ingress. Okay. So what will happen is, okay, so let me remove this as well. I don't want this diagram. So for example, we have 3 pods inside our cluster. Okay, pod 1, pod 2, okay, and then we have one more pod, pod 3. Okay. So inside our cluster, we have created 3 different pods. One is for front end, one is for back end, and one is for DB. Okay, so in this case, so for example, front end, and this is for backend, and this I will consider as DB. Okay, so these are deployed on 3 different node machines. For example, worker 01, worker 02, worker 03. Okay, now you want to communicate between these ports because front end application will be communicating with the backend, and then it will connect to the DB, right? So if you want this communication to happen, generally in Kubernetes, what we do is we create one service. Okay, so whenever user is trying to access our application or do something with our application, right? So what will happen, or any request will be redirected to the service. Okay, so this will be redirected to the service, and service will redirect the request to pod. Means no user is directly communicating with the pod. That is not possible. So if anyone wants to communicate with our application, then he needs to check at the service level. Okay. And from service, the request will be redirected to the specific pods. And within this service, we can communicate with the help of cluster API as well. Okay. So for example, this is my cluster. Okay. So what will happen to this cluster? There will be one IP address configured, right? So that IP will be configured to the service. Okay. And the service will take out all the requests to this different pods which are available inside this cluster. Okay. So generally, cluster API, we can say that cluster APIs help us to communicate within the cluster only. Okay. If suppose we have some pods running in front end, back end, and database. Okay. In this case, we can use cluster API to communicate within that service only. Okay. So now how to create one cluster API? Let's we'll do one thing. Okay. Services will take the services in tomorrow's session because this will take a lot of time, and even I am feeling tired, very tired today. Okay. So we'll do one thing. We'll continue the services topic again tomorrow. Okay. We'll practice still labels and init containers only. Okay. So do you have any questions?
No.
చెప్పు రాజా.
లేదన్నా.
Okay. So we'll wind up this. Okay. Bye.